Good Yontif. Hineni ha'oni mema'as, nir ash v'nifchad mepachad, yoshev tehilot Yisrael, bati la'amod ulehitchanin lefanecha, al amcha Yisrael, asher shlachuni va'af al pi sha'eni kedai v'hagun lekach. Here I am, poor in deeds, trembling in fear in front of the Holy One of Israel. I came here before you to plead on behalf of your people, who sent me, although I am hardly worthy of the task. These are the opening words of the Hineni prayer, traditionally recited just prior to the Musaf Amidah on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Hineni is a prayer chanted by the cantor, and its theme is humility. The Hebrew word for humility is anavah. In fact, the root of anavah is the second word of the prayer right after Hineni, almost as if the cantor is saying, the cantor is, in fact, saying, here I am with great humility, about to lead all of you in worship, and please know that like you, I'm not perfect. Nonetheless, let us go forth and pray. I believe that humility is among the very highest of Jewish values. What is humility? Well, I should know, because when it comes to humility, I'm the best. There is no one who does humility better than me. Seriously, humility is not merely that you don't boast or tell people how great you are. Humility is, in Judaism, much more than that. In Judaism, Moshe Rabbeinu is the primary example of humility. The Sifrei, our classical midrash on the book of Numbers, teaches that Moses' humility was a direct result of his unparalleled level of prophecy. The text suggests a causal relationship because God chose to speak with Moses face to face. This profound experience of divine infinity gave Moses the ultimate perspective on his own finite humanity. In essence, the Sifrei teaches that the greater one's true perception of God, the deeper one's humility must necessarily be. In a famous letter to his son, Nachmanides sets out three characteristics of a humble person. The first is that a truly humble person should be restrained in speech and slow to anger. The second is that a person should always see others as being greater than oneself. And the third is that a human being should always stand in awe of God. For Nachmanides, this is what truly keeps our heart humble. An awareness that there's something greater than you as an individual. And I think this is a core tenet of Judaism, and the reason Judaism places such a focus on community. A humble person accepts that alone he is nothing. A humble person recognizes that without others, she is nothing. According to Jewish teaching, a person without humility sees themselves as unconnected to the community, and much of what is wrong in this world today can be attributed to a stunning lack of humility almost everywhere you look. Let's look at this through the lens of Nachmanides' paradigm. In America today, calm, respectful speech isn't valued. Although this trend began before social media existed, there is no question that social media is incompatible with humility, the very trait that is the basis for civil communal discourse. By its very nature, social media encourages hot takes. A hot take is a quick, commonly provocative or contrarian reaction to events. A hot take is usually almost always devoid of any evidence, which is not surprising, since a hot take is offered almost immediately after something happens. Here's an innocuous example. After the first NFL week of games, pundits offered hot takes about the team's season. Well, the Chiefs lost in Brazil, and they probably won't win another game. Their season is over. Now, one NFL game is not evidence of anything, but a hot take, almost by definition, is not tethered to the facts. It's tethered to the emotion of the person who offers it, And the intent of a hot take is to provoke an emotional hot take in response. We live in a world of hot takes, of influencers and content creators. There is a vanishing appetite for in-depth analysis of any kind, for long-form journalism, for thoughtful and extended analysis of anything from politics to a review of kitchen appliances. If you take the time to notice, virtually everything is much shorter than it once was. As hard copies of magazines and newspapers disappear and migrate to the internet, everything is brief, which is unusual because the internet has an infinite amount of room. And all of this has led to a profound and dangerous inability to have any thoughtful, nuanced discussion or debate. We live in a world in which people don't so much listen as wait. While you are talking, I'm thinking of the ways you're wrong so I can attack you when you're done. The people who now influence public opinion are even less qualified than in the past. In another, more civil era, people like George Will on one side and Chris Matthews on the other, regardless of what you think of them, had extensive experience either in academia or politics or both. Agree or disagree, they had opinions based on experience in their area of expertise. But today, anyone with a phone and with a tripod can broadcast their opinion. And if they're bombastic enough, if they are angry enough, or if they are emotional enough, if they have that certain something that allows them to go viral, they can influence tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of followers. To go back to sports, Stephen A. Smith is an example. He began his career as a sports writer, and he jumped to ESPN, and he became the king of the hot take. And he's really, really good at it. Within minutes of something happening in the sports world that grabs his attention, he's got a post about it. But now, he's transitioning from sports to politics. Stephen A. is no more qualified to offer his opinion on politics than anybody in this room, maybe less so. An act of humility would be to think, well, I'm an expert on sports, so best to stay in my lane. But people aren't like that anymore, if they ever were. By virtue of his already large following, Stephen A. has 5 million followers. He will exert massive influence over his audience. Now, the challenge with the world we now inhabit is that while Stephen A. Smith does not have the humility to stay in his lane, his followers and the followers of other influencers often lack the humility to consider that there is more to an issue than what their chosen source offers. This is how we get to where we are now. People see a hot take and accept it as the whole truth. Now in sports, as much as I love sports and talk about them and listen to every single one of Stephen A.'s hot takes, the stakes are very small, so who really cares? The world doesn't rise and fall over Stephen A.'s hot take that the Chiefs are finished this year. But the challenge for us is that the social media hot take influencer is now the common currency of communication, and it impacts many areas of our lives much more important than sports. Politics, public policy, our elections are all heavily manipulated by social media. And as it turns out, social media is far more effective for racists, anti-Semites, misogynists, and all sorts of crazy fanatics than it is for thoughtful people with nuanced ideas. If you haven't seen it already, go home, and after Yontif, Google X anti-Semitism. A study has been done recently by the JCPA, and it has determined that the social media platform formerly known as Twitter is responsible for the largest dissemination of anti-Semitism pretty much in history. Last year alone, they had almost 700,000 unique posts that were anti-Semitic that reached a total of over 190 million followers. if you're on X after Yontif, please don't be on X anymore. The world we live in today is also home to a certain coarseness in our dialogue, something that is the exact opposite of humility and completely at odds with Jewish values. Judaism recognizes the corrosive effect of coarse language. Now, we can easily pass off coarse and harsh language as no big deal, but the repeated impact of this language diminishes society. And let's face it, when the leader of this country uses such language frequently, it empowers others to do the same. Now, if you've ever had the great misfortune to watch a sporting event with me, you'd know that I'm not a prude when it comes to harsh language. But you will never, for any reason, hear me use any curse words or inappropriate language from the pulpit or while I'm teaching or at a board meeting or at any public event, ever. I don't use foul language in the classroom, even as our students seem to think it's perfectly fine to use words around me, the senior rabbi, for which I would have been tossed out of religious school. I do not want our students to see the leader of this community using even the mildest of foul language. And as a rule, I don't think our elected officials should use words in public that you would not want to hear from me from this bima. Nachmanides sets out two other characteristics of humility. Recognize others as greater than yourself and stand in awe before God. I see these as profoundly connected. True humility is to acknowledge that you are not the center of the universe, and today the world chafes at that notion. To return to social media, the algorithms are designed to make you the center of the universe. You get a highly curated slice of the world in your feed, full of things the algorithm thinks will make you happy, improve your life, and things you never knew you needed. Most importantly, when you recognize that you are not the center of the universe, you acknowledge, and this is key for our world, you acknowledge that you may be wrong. You acknowledge that someone else could be right. And this, above everything else I've discussed, is perhaps the greatest threat to the world we hope to build. In our world, a conspicuous lack of humility is manifest in the certainty that I'm right and you're wrong. It takes an alarming degree of hubris or stupidity to be so convinced of your opinion that even facts can't dissuade you. In a world in which we receive most of our news from sources that an algorithm tailors to our worldview, all of our so-called news only reinforces the ideas we already believe or are inclined to believe. And this feedback loop both convinces us not only that we are right, but also that those who disagree are wrong. We began this evening with the words of the cantor, Hineni, here I am, poor in deeds, trembling in fear. It is a declaration of vulnerability. It is the ultimate expression of not having all the answers. And yet, we live in a world that screams at us to have all the answers instantly, to be certain, to be right. Part of the solution to these fraught times is for people to be open to the possibility that we may be wrong, that our worldview may need to be modified or altered or completely thrown out. Now, I realize the irony of having me present this idea because it takes a certain hubris to even become a rabbi, to stand in front of a congregation and offer an interpretation of the Jewish tradition and of Jewish history. I'm literally standing here as an influencer, albeit from a different era. But nevertheless, a significant part of my job is to teach and interpret our tradition for you. Now, I recognize that tonight and tomorrow morning, there will be rabbis around the world offering a completely different interpretation of our tradition. But the very nature of our tradition demands a multiplicity of ideas and interpretations. And as you listen to me, I ask you to consider how you hear my sermons or the sermons of anyone else up here. Rather than listening, Are you just waiting for the sermon to end so you can tell someone the reasons you disagreed? Will you be happy that my sermons somehow reinforce your worldview, or will you be angry that my sermons do not align with your worldview? From my point of view, the best outcome of any sermon is that it gives you food for thought. It's not about me being right or wrong and you being right or wrong. It's about opening your mind to someone else's point of view. And being open to someone else's point of view is entirely a matter of humility. So tonight, on Kol Nidrei, my prayer for all of us is a simple one. May we be blessed with the strength and the courage to utter the three most humbling and perhaps most sacred words in any language. I don't know. I don't know, so I will listen. I don't know, so I will learn. I don't know, so I will not rush to judgment. To stand before the Holy One is to stand before the infinite and be reminded of how finite we truly are. That is the lesson of Moses, and it is the lesson for all of us. And in that space of not knowing, true community can be built. In that quiet space of humility, a fractured world can begin to heal. May we find the courage to enter that space tonight. Gamar Chatima Tova.